it's time for today's perspective. And well, throughout the day here on France 24, we're often looking at stories of corruption, destruction, stories that look at the cruelty of our world, pain and suffering. But what is the reality for this earth and all its billions of people? Well, our guest today decided to take a trip around it, armed with 20 or so questions and a determination to ask as wide a range of people as possible to respond to them. The goal, get a real view of the world as humans see and feel it. Mr. Cyril Bruyelle, welcome to the show. Now, your book, Us Humans, it translates roughly out, brings together these interviews that you did. Can you tell me firstly why you felt this need to take off and get a picture of the globe?
Well, more or less, you just said it. Like in 2016, I was a bit pessimistic about the world. My vision of the world through the media that I could have was like, okay, everything's gonna collapse, you know. And I was a bit frustrated of my vision of the world. I said, is it really like this, and how to understand it? Because, you know, we have this social bubble around us, and you are more and more stuck in this social bubble. And I said, maybe the best way to understand the world is just to go and ask questions to people. So I created a questionnaire of 20 questions about education, the future, happiness, fears, dreams, etc. And I said to myself, okay, I need to ask those questions to different people worldwide, from different nationalities, of course, but also from different social backgrounds. So going and ask those questions to farmers, to politicians, to entrepreneurs, and just see what they think about the world. So I traveled 1 year in 2017 to ask those 20 questions to 500 people all around the world. And when I came back at the end of the year, I had two objectives. The first one is to keep asking those questions. And the second one was to spread the incredible message of humanity that comes out of this question.
Because indeed, tell us, after that year of asking 500 people, what was the conclusion you came to?
That we are much more the same than we think as humans. We hear every day why we are different in the media, in the news, but we often forget why we are the same. And so that's the message that we want to spread now as an NGO. At the beginning, I was trying to understand the world. Now we are trying to bring people closer together. Give
people who haven't read the book an idea of your questions, because you did think one long and hard of how to phrase them, but also a lot of them are those basic questions of what do we fear, who would we like to have a drink with. Give us an idea of the flavour and why you picked those questions.
Well, I'll give two examples and then explain how I wrote these questions. One that I like is, if you had to describe our planet to an alien, what would you say to him? Another one, very basic, is what is your dream or what do you need? It's complicated to have questions that nomadic people in Mongolia would understand, as well as business people in New York. It has to be very open. And then I wanted to have questions that would call your imagination more than your short memory. If I tell you, what do you think about the world today? You might think about images of Somalia that we have just seen, for example, on France 24. So I wanted people to take a step back, you know, and think by themselves.
Yeah, bring us into a little bit of our imagination. But you mentioned Mongolia there, and that was something that I found quite surprising in your book. They seem to be the happiest among us.
Yeah, it was surprising. We have we analyze all of the answers are in a database, and we make statistics, let's say. And then the question about happiness is, to you, who's the happiest person in the world? And in Mongolia, more than 70% of the people said me, or Mongolian people. In other countries, it's only 10%. So it was a bit funny. I think it's linked with their nomadic way of life, the way that they live in family, close to one another, not with many interactions from what's happening in the world and everything. So I don't know. It might come from there.
Different priorities, definitely something to look at, because also the needs they had. I mean, 70% said that they were fine, even though, you know, logistically and in other ways we might see a lot that they could need. There was also, I filled out the 20 questions myself before reading the interviews in the book. I was quite surprised with a few of them, notably this vicar in London. He had a few surprising replies.
In London?
You speak to one man, and a man of the cloth, we're expecting him to want to teach kindness to children, and you know, the person he wants to have a drink with, I was expecting something spiritual. But in your book, you get a lot of quite surprising reactions from people.
Lots of surprising reactions, and in the book, it's the first time that I can do that because we produce a lot of content that we put on the social media. But all the interviews are filmed, so of course we have a lot of content. But in the book, there are 30 interviews that I fully transcript. And it's the first place where I can do that because you cannot put a full interview on social media. It's going to be 20 minutes long. It's impossible. And so people can start to play the game to compare people. You have a short biography, and for each individual, you can go into his vision of the future, of education, fears, dreams, and start to compare people's answers. And then you realize that, indeed, many people have the same answers.
Indeed. This interview, you've interviewed, when the book went to press, there was over 750 people. It's a project that, though, is ongoing, you were saying.
Yeah, when I came back at the end of 2017, as I said, I wanted that we keep asking those questions. And now we have more than 12 teams who have gone traveling to keep asking those questions. So we have teams going all the time. I went in my former business school.
But you generally have an idea that as humans, there is something that unites us. We are kinder than news journalism might make us think. So why the need to keep going?
Because I had interviewed only 500 people. It's
not a sufficient sample.
And I want people to live what I lived, you know? Because if we want to have a bigger voice and make ourselves visible, I need to gather people around the project. And I think the people who will be most efficient to spread the world will be the one who will live the adventure.
Indeed, convince more and more people around the world of how we're all the same and how ultimately we want nice things in life. Cyril Bruyelle, thanks so much for coming in and giving us a flavour of your book, Us Humans, or Nous Humains is the title in French. So we're going to have to leave it. And now, if you're just joining us, these are our top stories. A second night of violent clashes on the streets of Beirut. Protesters determined to continue their anti-government demonstrations despite a crackdown by security forces. After being forced to resign mid-October, many now expect that Saad Hariri could be renamed as Prime Minister there. Meanwhile, calling for closer cooperation and for more international support. Leaders of the 5 countries in the Sahel hold a summit on security just days after 71 soldiers were killed in an attack on a military base in Niger. Meanwhile, there's ongoing protests in India. At least 100 activists were injured in New Delhi on Sunday. Protesters there clashing with police as they marched against a new law on citizenship. The government has cut internet connections in many areas in a bid, it says, to maintain order.